So now I'm going to attempt to sum up the day. When I told people at home, I told my family that I was going to be doing a talk that was related to sports, and you would not believe the hilarity around the dinner table. Because I am probably, in fact, definitely the least sporty person in Scotland. I don't understand sport. I don't get what it's for. Well, I do a bit now, but I didn't do sport. And it was interesting because my experience of sport at school was I was absolutely miserable. It was decades ago, I grant you, but unfortunately, from what we've heard today, it hasn't changed for all our children and young people. Sport for me at school meant being cold, wet, soaked through and shouted at on a hockey field. I was utterly miserable. And if I wasn't being insulted and shouted at and jeered at on a hockey field for being incompetent, I couldn't see half the time because the rain was on my glasses, and I was a very clumsy child. I was in the gym. And in the gym, I couldn't pull myself up on those sodding ropes. So my gym teacher stood in the background and tutted and rolled her eyes, and all my classmates sniggered at me. I was utterly miserable. And I realise now as an adult that she was giving them permission to snigger at me. And I hadn't thought about her in decades, and I started thinking about her today. And do you know what? I still hate that woman. I can see her red hair, big muscles, the lot. She was horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I was miserable. However, I was not a stupid child, and I had no intentions of continuing to be miserable, so I developed an exit strategy for sports. I took extra Latin. And I am not kidding. I got a Latin O-level because of my sports teacher, so work that one out for yourself. And it wasn't a posh school. I was the only person in the Latin class. It was run informally by a teacher who happened to have a qualification in Latin, but was actually supposed to be teaching French. So that's where I came from in sport. And I had hoped and believed, or something along those lines, that it wasn't like that anymore for anybody. But actually, unfortunately, I've seen what we've heard today is that it is for some. And the knock-on effect for that, I thought about this today, which I haven't thought about in years either. The knock-on effect for that, for me, was that I made absolutely no effort to involve my 3 daughters in sport. I didn't take them to sport. I got them swimming lessons, but that was about all I did. Because even to this day, I cannot ride a bike and I cannot swim because I was so miserable at school with anything to do with the physical that I just opted out. I hope and pray that that is not the experience of most young people today. But we did hear people saying that those sorts of things were their experience, and it is not good enough. That said, I started to see sport through a different lens through my 3 nieces, who are all highly competitive, very sportive, and very, very top-range athletes. One of them in particular is an elite CrossFit athlete, which I don't know anything about, but it's a hell of a thing to do. And when Lucy was 9, Lucy was told that she couldn't be a gymnast because she was too small. End of. That was it. Can't be a gymnast. Go away. You're too small. Roll on now, or a few years later. Well, she was 9 when she was told that, I think. Now she's in her early 20s. And if you want to Google her, her name's Lucy Campbell. And 2 years ago, the BBC Sports website said she was the fittest woman in the UK. So there. I hope her sports teacher, I hope that gymnast coach is reading that somewhere along the lines. I'll come back to experiences in a moment, because for me, the 2 themes of the day have been not just about experiences, but about rights. And I think from Julie and Nick, we heard so much about rights. And the thing that stood out for me was these are rights that have to be in practice. They're not about policies, they're not about procedures on their own. You can have all the policies you want in life and all the procedures you want in life, but if you don't do something about them, if you don't live them, if you don't breathe them, you're not actually going to get anywhere. And what was interesting from both Julie and Nick's point of view was the way they framed this legislation as, I think Nick called it a generational opportunity. And if we can grasp that opportunity, then kids now won't have the sort of experience that I had, and the experience they will have will be the life-affirming and enhancing experience that young Paul had. So I think that, for me, is absolutely amazing. Hang on, I'm checking my notes here. Yeah, I think the other thing that I hadn't really appreciated until today was the wideness of the obligation. The obligation is on all of us, it's on parents, it's on the state, it's on local authorities. And that in itself is a double-edged sword, I think, because it means there is a huge amount and a huge army, if you like, of organisations and people who should be involved, but getting them involved and getting them to work together and getting them to come to the right sort of place is not going to be easy. And some of those challenges were amazing. If you'll permit me, Mary, I was horrified when you talked about that contract you've signed. And I'm not a lawyer, but something in me believes that that has to be illegal. There has to be something in there that cuts across the unfair contract terms. We cannot continue to commoditise people like that. It's just not right. And I was utterly horrified. I think those were the main things that picked up on me from the point of view of rights. And while you were speaking, actually, I Googled Kaniska, who apparently was a Spartan princess and athlete. So if that's the role model you're offering, I think that's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. But let's face it, what was the real thing? What were the experiences that we heard about? I've lost the page in my notes. Talk amongst yourselves for a while. Good, I found them. The experiences, the admiration I have for the young women who spoke to us, for Ray, for Gracie, for Charlotte, for Abby, for Georgina, is absolutely boundless. And what I thought was amazing was that they were willing to talk and they were willing to share things that weren't all good things. They talked about being scared to speak. They talked about being embarrassed. They talked about feeling shame. But they came through that. And the positive things that resonated for me were things about feeling belonging, feeling valued, that rugby was welcoming. It didn't look welcoming to me, all those big men charging about, but that's my experience of rugby, is looking at it from a kind of football pitch kind of television thing and thinking, oh, that looks scary. But for them, it was welcoming. For them, it has been empowering. So that, for me, was what it was about. It was about these experiences, about learning from these experiences and taking that. And I now have a much better understanding that sport isn't actually just for running about and feeling cold, that it gives you so much more. It hasn't given me that, but I can see now what it has given to other people. And I've learned a hell of a lot today. So ultimately, what are we talking about here? Well, I think what we're talking about is to go back to rights and to go back to experiences and how we put those things together. I mean, the old cliche is it doesn't matter whether you lose, it's how you play the game. This does not appear to be the ethos that is running sport at all levels in this country. It does seem to matter about winning. And there's nothing wrong with winning. You can win in all sorts of ways. And maybe even if you're just playing the game, you're learning how to win in other aspects of your life. But I'd like to go a bit further than that. When we talk about rights, when we go back to the Promise Scotland, it talks about Scotland's children being loved and safe and protected. And children today, and many of our speakers today, have talked about the rights as a right. I wrote it down in block capitals with 2 exclamation marks, and I feel as though I should be shouting it, because that's what it's about. Years ago, somebody said to me that as a mother, what she felt she had to do was offer her children the roots to grow and the wings to fly. And I think that's a better analogy for what sport should be doing. Because I think if sport can help offer children the roots to grow and the wings to fly, then what you're going to be doing is amazing. Now, the flight path that each individual child is going to take will be different. Some of them will want to, and some of them will fly to the top of the Olympic podium. Some of them will fly into Starbucks and have hot chocolate and marshmallows and tell their gran what a great day they had. It doesn't matter. What happens is that sport can be a part of teaching them, giving those roots to grow, helping them find the wings to fly. And I think what we've heard today is some absolutely incredible stories about different flight paths that different children and young people have taken. And I firmly believe that those stories will inspire our conversations as we go along. Thank you so much for allowing me the privilege to speak to you. I've had a wonderful day. I hope you have had too. Thank you.